Oh boy, here we go again. Another game where I just can't get a kill. Every peek I take, I just lose. We've all been there before. You can't be on point every single game. Sometimes you're just not feeling it. But there are ways we can minimize those games from happening. The first thing people think about is their aim is off. Sure, crosshair placement can always use some work, but there's usually more to it. But before we do that, if you really want to take things to the next level and climb up to Radiant, then you want to check out our website at SkillCapped.com. On our website, we have multiple comprehensive guides and courses on various aspects of the game. Tracking was one of the issues that I wanted to work on, and SkillCapped had an entire guide to help me improve my tracking, along with various other aspects of my aim. This is just a taste of what SkillCapped has to help you improve in Valorant. We guarantee you'll see significant improvements quickly, so if you're interested in taking your game to the next level, the link will be provided in the description below. First up, what makes for a good position? When deciding what position to play, there are 4 things you should be asking yourself. 1. Can you easily escape from that position? 2. Are you going to be exposed from multiple angles in this position? 3. Can your teammates help you out in this position? And 4. Is this position predictable by the enemy? If you can't easily escape out of a position, then it won't do you much good. You'll likely get overrun and killed by the enemy. By having an escape route, you're able to grab a pick and then have the chance to get out alive. Following that up, you don't want to be exposed from multiple angles, as well that would open up the possibility that you get shot from multiple angles. If several enemies peek your position at the same time, it'll be nearly impossible for you to win that engagement. You're at a number disadvantage, plus you'd have to flick onto an enemy if you were to win out. Now remember that Valorant is a team-based game. You don't have to make individual hero plays to win out. That's why number 3 is so important to ask yourself. If you are able to play a position where you and your teammate can help each other out, that's huge. We'll delve into this in just a second. And with number 4, predictability is one of the biggest issues that players have. If the enemy is able to accurately identify where you're positioned, then they can pre-aim and confidently peek that position and kill you. Keep these 4 questions in mind whenever you are deciding to play a certain position to determine if it may be good or bad. To add on to that, you want a position that maximizes angle advantage. In Valorant, the closer you are from a wall, the less you're visually able to see. If someone is further away from the wall than you are, then they'll be able to see more. This is the premise of angle advantage. In this picture, player A is further from the contending wall than player B. Because of this, player A will be able to spot player B first. This is massive, as you could even shoot down a player before they can even see you with the concept of angle advantage. Whenever you're going for a peek, stay as far back from the contending wall or corner as you can. In this clip, I peek showers by staying as far back behind this corner of the wall as possible. I do the same when I continue forward and peek onto truck. I hug the wall that is behind me. This versus hugging the wall that's in front of you. Again, with angle advantage, you'll see the enemy later than they can see you. That's no good. As a rule of thumb, if you're hugging the wall that is behind you, you're maximizing angle advantage in a majority of your aim duels. Another concept to consider when getting the perfect position is off angles. Off angles are positions that players don't usually expect you to be in. This throws off their crosshair placement and allows you to gain the upper hand in the engagement. Off angles are very simple to do. Let's take the corner of pocket on bind, which is commonly played. We can make this an off angle by moving slightly to the right of the corner. Now when players try to pre-aim and peek the corner of pocket, they'll end up over swinging. Not only that, but their crosshair is going to be in the wrong spot and they'll be forced to make a micro adjustment. This is the essence of off angles. Take a common angle and then move slightly off from it. You want to use off angles when the more common positions start to become too predictable. This small switch up can be all it takes to give yourself the edge in the fight and prevent the enemy team from getting comfortable with their pushes. One of the first things to think about when figuring out the perfect positioning is what utility the enemy has. Let's take the A site on Ascent for example. A really good position to play on Ascent is on top of these boxes in the corner. If you're playing Jet, Omen, or Raze, you'll likely see them playing here at some point. On paper, it's a very good position as you have the high ground advantage. Enemies will be forced to flick up to this angle, which will be tough unless they purposely clear it. Now let's change the situation. If the enemy has a silver dart or owl drone, they'll be able to easily scout out that position. Suddenly things have turned from good to terrible. You get tagged and have minimal escape options from here. See where that first question comes into play now? Not to mention if the enemy has flashes to follow up these informational abilities. You'll be blinded, tagged, and have no choice but to run and hope they whip, which is unlikely. However, if you predicted this possibility, there is still a way you could play this position out. If you have a teammate come in and shoot down any utility that comes by, then your location is still concealed. Now suddenly it's a good position again if you prepared for it. This is why predicting enemy utility is so important. You want to have already thought up possible situations that could occur and how to counter them to keep your position a mystery. Speaking of predictability, if you were to play this boosted position every single round, then you're going to get into trouble. This position is strong when players don't expect it. But if you play it every single round, then players are going to be able to adapt and make the proper adjustments to kill you. To avoid enemies predicting your moves, you want to constantly be changing positions. Maybe you played on top of the boxes last round. The next round you could switch it up by playing on top of generator. Again, this is a good position when it's not expected. You maintain the high ground angle and will be at an advantage during the initial duel. Top of generator is also easier to escape out of. It's not perfect, but you do have somewhat of a route to get to safety. From there you can switch things up again and play under heaven. This is a somewhat more predictable position, but typically isn't the first area that players will check as they push onto the site. This spot has the easiest escape route out of the 3. Just like that, we have 3 positions that we could play in that are all good if the enemy isn't ready for you to be there. You don't have to exactly follow these 3 positions, but changing things up every 1 or 2 rounds ensures that the enemy has to constantly guess where you're going to be. If you suddenly change position and then they try to peek your previous position, then you're going to catch them off guard and it's an easy peasy kill. We recommend having at least 3 positions on every site that you feel fits the majority of the 4 criteria that we mentioned earlier. That way you can keep switching between them to become less predictable. This next point is focused on our 3rd criteria, which is having a position where you can work with your teammates. Communication is one of the key factors to being in a good position. We've seen it before where a player thinks their teammate has their back, but they don't. However, there wasn't any communication regarding teammate positions or whether someone was going to peek and wanted backup. We aren't mind readers, or if you are, then that's a little creepy. There are 2 important setups that can be done with your teammates. One is crossfires. This is when you and your teammate are positioned in opposite sides of a choke point. This way, when someone pushes through that point, they'll be shot from 2 sides. Unless the enemy has aimbot and does an insane 180-degree turn, this setup is nearly a guaranteed kill. The second setup is for double peeking. This is when you and your teammate peek an area together. By doing this, you get into a 2 vs X situation, taking advantage of strength in numbers. The key to doing this properly is communicating to your team prior to peeking. That way your teammate will be on the same page as you and will actually peek.
That was close. Is there swing on this guy?
Enemy remaining.
Play together.
Teammate players just assume you're going to know what to do, which 99% of the time, they don't. Say it straight and tell your team what you want to do. Most of the time, they'll be down to do the play. With good communication, you'll be able to set you and your team in the best positions to outplay your opponents. So please, make sure you use that microphone. Going forward, another thought when positioning is to base it off your abilities. Abilities don't kill, but they can certainly help. Let's take the infamous Sova wallbang on Ascent B site. This is Sova's bread and butter on the map because his abilities set himself so well for it. You want to position yourself right in front of the wall where the ult orb is. Now you want to gather information on Garage with either Sova's recon vault or owl drone. If you're able to tag a player, you can spam the Odin or Ares through the wall for heavy damage and even a pick. Now let's take it to another level with the Sentinels, particularly Killjoy and Cypher. Both these agents have abilities that provide stalling power and information on enemy locations. With these agents especially, you want to play back and let the abilities do the work first. For example, we have a diagonal tripwire that was set on lane by Casper from Big. He then specifically positions himself in the back of sight so that once someone gets stuck in the trip, he can perfectly peek out and eliminate them. This was the perfect position and setup to get essentially a free kill. At the highest level of Valorant, the winners are typically the ones who can better position themselves to take advantage of their abilities. Whether that's being in a position to peek from a trip or whether that's being in a position to peek from a flash, have an idea for how you want to use an ability and position yourself accordingly to take advantage of it. Now that we have some positions in more specific scenarios, we just sit in that position and wait for enemies to show up, right? Well, not quite. If you're in a commonly held angle, it's easy for enemies to expect it and isolate that specific angle during a peek. This can give them an advantage during the fight. To decrease that advantage, you want to be actively moving. You can do this by peeking temporarily and then hiding back into cover. Repeatedly do this until an enemy shows up. If you're already in position to fight, take it. If not though, you want to continue peeking back and forth, taking a few shots at a time each peek. However, you want to change the timing of each peek that you do. If you peek the exact same time over and over, the enemy will be able to predict your peek and shoot. By delaying just a few milliseconds, that will off-put the enemy and make for an easier aim duel when you do peek. Keep yourself moving and change the timing of individual peeks so the enemy isn't able to perfectly peek you. Last but not least, we're going to wrap up with a few mid-round questions to ask yourself that will determine where you want to be positioned. The first is whether you're able to get into a favorable or unfavorable fight. Let's take this scenario where you're the only one holding B site. The enemy is close and your team is nowhere nearby to help you out. This is an unfavorable fight for you to take. In this situation, the right move is to get the heck out of there. Unless you're 10s, chances are you're going to be dominated if you stay on the site. At best, you might get a 1-for-1 trade. There's no need to try to make a hero play. Reposition instead. Back up and give the enemies the site so you can regroup with your team and retake it. If you're expecting an unfavorable fight, you also want to stand further back from a choke point so you have more space to retreat. Now on the other hand, if you're in a favorable fight, such as when you have strength in numbers, then you want to be more aggressive. Get up close into the enemy's face with your teammates and overwhelm them. Speaking of strength in numbers, there's a simple rule based on man advantage to determine your individual positioning. If you're by yourself and your team has the man advantage, then you want to play more passive and far back. There's no need to risk overextending and getting yourself killed. This will take away the man advantage and give the enemy team a chance back into the round. Now if you're at a man disadvantage, you want to be in more aggressive positions. This is because you need to actively look for ways to even the odds. If you let the enemy maintain the edge in numbers, then they're likely going to overwhelm your team and win the round. That's all we have for today's video. Think about the questions that we brought up today and try the new positions that we talked about based on that criteria. We're sure you'll be able to snag a few extra kills with them. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel down below to help support us. I'm Dr. Zora, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.